In opening opposition, we have DJ Bass and in closing opposition, we have Gina at the time for it. In closing opposition, we have Pop Something Now. Before I begin, I'd like to remind the audience members to keep their shares and gifts to a minimum, keep only the discreet speeches. Without further ado, on the motion, this House believes that the Pope should denounce all U.S. presidential candidates who use Islam anti-Islamic rhetoric in their campaigns. I call upon the Prime Minister to begin this.
The rhetoric that we want to discuss today is the rhetoric that Islam and Muslims are bad, and that rhetoric doesn't matter what religion you are for a better future for all of us. Before I move on, I take a look at what our burden from side of opening government and our burden is to simply show that the Pope's involvement in social engineering people for a greater good will significantly make it more effective for this rhetoric to be disposed. And our problem that we want to present today is that we need to fight against Islamophobia together. But now it's either only Muslims are fighting. The siege of Assad is only a defense of Muslims. That is why we want to impose this law that all sides, including Pope as a leader of Christianity, should also join for this thing to be better. So no involvement inside other religion in this circumstance is never helpful to dispose this rhetoric today. I have three questions I want to present. The first question is, when has involvement from multiple religions been successful in social engineering people? The second question is that why is anti-Islamic rhetoric it's not a legitimate political manifesto? And third question, why is the Pope the one that we choose to solve this rhetoric? And finally, I will explain what we want to achieve by the end of what we can achieve. Now, the first question, when has involvement from multiple religions successfully social engineered people to destroy rhetoric and become a better community? An example is the fight at anti-Semitism. Take an example before. Jews and Muslims are very, very bad enemies. They discriminate on each other, they don't talk to each other, looking at each other will cause severe harm. So in this case, the past Jews have been discriminated by people. They are deprived of people don't care their welfare, and many detrimental harms happen to them. But what happens when the church and Muslims order the fear only join in to produce the rhetoric and the fact that they are all grand believe the right thing there. Only then will we achieve exploitation in these people together as a whole so that they can develop. Now, an example now in secular states such as United States of America, the tension between these regions are less. We can see the outcome as it happened today. So the simple characterization that I have today is that Islamophobia is a very big problem that has been here as long as we have faced before. But it has been enhanced even more from the attacks of Paris bombing and the 9/11 attacks. So now it's a bigger problem for us to solve now, and it's a new problem for us to take care of as a whole community. Only then will we solve this through an involvement by social engineering people, disposing of the rhetoric and bringing up a new thought that what Muslims are, what Islam are, and changing the fact that everybody is just equal, nobody is better, nobody is less better. So let's go on to my second question. Why is anti-Islam rhetoric not a legitimate political manifesto for these US presidential candidates to use in their actions? Simply because anti-Islamism is not a form, it's always a form of discrimination. We are not okay when discrimination is even there. If you are not okay when a white person calls an African American black, then you are not okay when you discriminate on Jews or discriminate on Christians and Muslims. It works the same principle that we don't agree any form of discrimination in our world today. We don't tolerate them, but we don't tolerate these US presidential candidates bringing on that African Americans used to be slavers, then we also don't agree when they use the word of discrimination. Only this form will enhance our point that it will be more justified for us to denounce these presidential candidates when they use an anti-Islamic rhetoric. Before I move on,
Are you then okay with these people using Islamic campaigns?
Yes, okay. We are not okay when you go against the fact that you produce Islam as a bad religion. We are okay with anything that you want to go, but when you decharacterize these people, when you want to call these people bad, when you put the label, they are bad. They are African Americans, they don't deserve anything. Only then we want to agree. So that the Pope, a very influential figure for these historic speeches. The Pope is the most influential figure, or one that we say the leader of Christianity. Because we choose these people, because the leaders are the leaders of the followers by the end of the day. It's not because we have a very preconceived notion that Christians are very tight enemies to Muslims. But it's not because of their religion, but it's already the fact that these attacks have been made on Muslims, such as the 9/11 attack when they received that Al-Qaeda attack the World Trade Center. But the majority of Christians in the US have already been taught that they are not friends with Muslims, so they should discriminate Muslims. And now they side of the opposition are trying to enhance this rhetoric even more and make this discrimination worse. On the other side, they are as a rhetoric for them. Right, no thank you. Let me tell you a story. Before, there was a mosque wanting to be built beside the World Trade Center. But only then, they see that there are many people going against this mosque, saying that this mosque will bring desecration of religion of Christianity. They are not respecting the World Trade Center that has been burned and has been crashed. Only then you see that the toleration of tension between them is not acceptable. When you just want it to be a mosque beside the World Trade Center, it's not accepted. You see that the rhetoric now is extended even more. That's why we must exclude this before spot and be good. So the Pope's job or the Pope's characterization has to be to recorrect these people's minds. That they have to recorrect what they thought is just because they think the Christians think that they are the only ones right doesn't mean that anybody else will not feel. So thank you. So the Pope in any religion they should understand that the rhetoric between them will just be equal. It's the political power of the Pope will also influence not just the Christians but also the Muslims and the Jews to tolerate every people just as they are. And it's also a representative for Christians that they are followers, so they will follow the Pope by the end of the day. So let's take a look at what we'll achieve from our proposal. The involvement of the Pope is that we can correct the misconception of Christianity. So now, misconception happens in both sides, where Christians think that Muslims are bad, and Muslims think that Christians are bad. When you use the political power and the leadership power of this Pope, only then will we characterize and we will reconceptualize their thoughts from side of Christianity and Muslims for a better community. So the second achievement that we get is that we can social engineer people to be tolerable. Because in this world that we live in, that's why discriminations happen, it's because we don't tolerate each other. Because we feel that we are more superior and they are the minority. That's why we think they are okay. So no matter, regardless of our religion or our race, we should all live together. And if we work together, when we all go out of this room, we believe that discrimination will happen lesser on the side of the world. Thank you.
Opposition.
The Pope, an individual who has an identity, who's associated with Christianity, someone who doesn't necessarily go in line with Islam as a Pope. The Prime Minister had one job for you in today's debate. He had to prove to you why he was okay with the Pope as a Christian idol to make a controversial statement in the world out there to somehow socially engineer. I'm going to talk to you about two things. Number one, I'm going to talk to you about how you destroy the core principles of democracy as a whole. And number two, how you destroy the image of the Pope. How you destroy the image of the Pope. Right? But before that, several rebuttals. Because he came up here and told us how Islamophobia is a huge problem and something they want to solve through the Pope, but they can socially engineer people. He considered how the Pope is a Christian idol and someone who Christians generally look up to. I have three responses. Number one, if you want to fix Islamophobia and change the perception, you don't see you using the Pope as a credible individual. Or number two, the these campaigns as a whole, right? Because of the harms, I'll prove you in my speech. But number two, you have to understand that there are also many other individuals who are still influential who can do it, right? And here's a comparative. Because the Pope is someone who has an identity, who is a Christian. So if he does something which is so controversial and support someone on the opposite end, which is when you harm his own people will lose trust upon him. Whereas if you compare it to other influential individuals, right, who can still do it, at least they are not tied to an identity of religion, especially if they say something controversial, they will get questioned. It's never a burden to prove to you why all these other people can still do it, or whether it's simply to prove to you why the Pope should sit down. Then here's a clear contradiction coming from the Prime Minister. Because when he came up here and told why you cannot use, your campaigns cannot be religious because then it will be unfair to the opposite religion, then when I feel, why are you still allowing Islamic campaigns, right? Because we believe if you don't want religion whatsoever, then you should remove it as a whole. Because now, if you are trying to remove oppression towards the Muslims, right? Now, if you still allow Islamic campaigns to carry on, then now these Muslims are free to oppress any other religion they want because they are then in power. It's extremely unfair to every other religion as a whole. Then he told us that the Pope is influential, which is true. Exactly why it is very, very harmful. In my speech, I will give you what are the three biggest differences. Number one, the voters. Number two, the Pope as a whole. And number three, the candidates of the election. Our stance is very simple. We believe that you shouldn't denounce these rhetorics as a whole in order to make it an equal playing field and truly fulfill the core principles of democracy. But before I proceed, closing.
Why would the Pope, who prioritizes peace and security for all innocent souls, be silently complicit in continuing discrimination and physical harm towards people?
We believe that the Pope has already said, right, how we should love everyone and things like that. But he has never made a controversial, explicit statement saying, why I am denouncing his anti-Islamic rhetoric and I love these Muslims. We believe there's a reason why he doesn't do that, and it's because of the controversy that it creates. But first, let's my first argument on the whole idea of democracy. Because you have to understand that the core principles of democracy is when your people are deserve a legit choice, something that should never have a third-party influence. Now this form of choice is now destroyed. Why? Because this Pope has this huge amount of influence, does something like this and makes a controversial statement. We believe there are three types of voters, right? There are those Islamic supporters, those anti-Islamic supporters, as well as those moderates. But who is most affected? We believe the moderates are the most affected. Because now they can't truly make a decision. Someone who truly represents himself, something that a democracy is supposed to do in the first place, right? Because if the Pope is telling you why you should do this, you sway these individuals and they are then limited and oppressed because then they can no longer make that decision, make that legitimate decision which they usually want to do. But other than the voters, you also harm the candidates as a Pope, right? Because now you're limiting these anti-Islamic candidates because it's extremely hard for them to push for their policies and actually garner that type of support. When someone like the Pope says something that you should not vote for this party because they're anti-Islamic, we believe it's harder for them to get an equal opportunity in the democracy. So it's not even a democracy anymore. It's literally go and vote for the Muslims because that's what I see. We believe that now we see other things, you're not even equal, instead heavier on the Islamic rhetorics, it's even harder for you to truly fight for that same responsibility on the ground. But before I proceed, you ruin the image of the Pope as a whole.
The rhetoric that Islam is a lovable religion, if this rhetoric, which is more credible, coming from the Pope or Abu Bakr al-Qurani?
We believe that any other individual can do it, and it's much, much better. Another individual who is not associated or tied to another religion, something we should always consider. Right? Why? Because we have to understand that when you ruin the image of the Pope, an individual who is a Christian idol and which all Christians look up to, when this individual makes a controversial statement and denounces anti-Islamic rhetoric, we believe you're indirectly labeling yourself as an Islam supporter and as other than Islam, I don't support it whatsoever, right? How do people react to this? These people will then get confused and enraged because their idol is not going against but we believe a huge chunk of the supporters will then get angry and enraged at what you're saying because they are very confused at what your idol is trying to propagate, right? Why is this so harmful when you separate your own supporters? Because now it's even harder for the Pope in the long run to fight for whatever change he wants to do, to fight for whatever policy or whatever statement he wants to do. The influence is no longer that. That's exactly why he hasn't done any explicit controversial statements in status quo. Because you recognize this potential harms when you split your own people, that's something side opening opposition are not willing to step. We believe you cannot use someone or a Christian idol to fight for something which is not necessarily in line with his stance. We are very proud to oppose.
Thank you very much. Government PPS.
Madam Chair, I'm going to talk about four things. Number one, what influence do presidential candidates have to the public? Number two, how does the Pope influence non-Christians to tolerate Muslims in society? Number three, what about other religions? Do we want involvement from other parties as well? And finally, why we think that the Church and the Pope has a prerogative to act, right? But before that, a few substantives coming from opposition side. Number one, we try to say that involvement in the fight against Islamic discrimination can happen from other people, not necessarily the Pope. But this is not necessarily a rebuttal or an argument against us, because what he says is that the Pope's involvement is not mutually exclusive. We think that the problem, the ironic things coming from opposition side is that he characterized that action and involvement from the Pope is going to be controversial, and that's where we think that it's really good thing, because controversies are what starts and enhances discourse in society. We would rather sit down. We would rather have someone influential like the Pope saying that Islam is good, rather than Roth saying that Islam is good and no one caring about it, right? We think we need this kind of controversy in order to facilitate discourse in society. And we think this discourse, it has been continuing from the past, but it has been diluted by the Paris attacks and we need involvement from many parties. And the Prime Minister already characterized how involvement from many multiple religions is really good to fight against any form of discrimination. For example, anti-Semitism, how even Muslim scholars got involved and said that anti-Semitism is something that is not justified. That's how we social engineer individuals, because the discourse and the rhetoric that this kind of discrimination is not legitimate becomes more credible, because there is a source of this rhetoric comes from a source that is not necessarily one that seems defensive, Mr. Speaker. Number two, they argue that Christianity is going to lose followers now. A really far-fetched argument. We would rather argue that Christianity is going to get more followers. How is that so? Because we think that what you said, the precedence that Christianity sets now, is that Christianity is a religion that is tolerable, caring to the majority of society, but secondly, is a religion that is consistent on its principles. Because Christianity has been tolerating Jews in the past and said that anti-Semitism is something that is not justified, we don't see why they should not be consistent under this kind of instance. That's why we would rather have Christianity to be consistent, and only then can it garner more votes. Sit down. Number 3, they are arguing why not Islamic campaigns. This is really simple. There's a difference between forwarding your ideas and like diluting and enforcing discrimination onto others. Because discrimination is an active harm towards another individual. That's why you would never allow individuals to run for president and say, my manifesto is to kill every Jew in the world. That's why like Nazism is something that's not justified. That's why ISIS and how their rhetoric is to kill every non-Muslim is something not justified. Compared to like moderate Islamism, where we only want to enforce like Islamic rhetoric, and we want people to talk or whatever, like things like that, that is more justified. And we would rather say that that is fair and something that we can tolerate as a political manifesto. And finally, they say that people on the fence now like will not join Christianity because Christianity becomes ambiguous. Because Christianity is forwarding an idea that is not Christian. This is really problematic because we think that Christianity has a political power to like fight for like rhetorics and narratives that are not necessarily always Christian. We think that the church has active involvement in abortion, even though abortion is not necessarily like between you and God. We think like social problems have involvement from religion, and we think that this is not necessarily going to affect the credibility of Christianity at all. Sit down. Now, first of all, what influence do presidential candidates have on the topic? We think that presidential like candidates are the apparatus of the mindset of people. Right? We think that when presidential candidates forward certain ideas, this rhetoric necessarily confirms individuals' biases. How is this so? Individuals who have a confirmation bias towards certain things, for example, Mexicans are bad, we necessarily think this kind of bias is confirmed by Donald Trump making a public statement that Mexicans should go to hell. Right? We think this is necessarily problematic because these individuals are significantly popular and have the ability to use media for their ideas, and this kind of propagation of values can subliminally integrate into individuals to socially construct individuals to be discriminated. We think that is why we do not want presidential candidates to be anti-Islam to begin with. Number 2, how does the vote influence? How does the church influence non-Christians? Right? We think even though you are not Christian, the Christianity and the church has significant influence towards you. How is that so? Let's take a look at moral codes of conduct and what we think is morally right and wrong. Right? We think a lot of moral codes of conduct were constructed since the past. Sit down. And in the past, we think that the majority of individuals in the past had a religion and necessarily Christianity. That's how social construct is constructed upon values that are coherent and parallel to what Christianity values are. For example, in the sixth commandment of the Bible, Old Testament, right? Thou shalt not kill. We think this kind of value is something that is coherent to everyone's moral understanding, that we should not kill anyone at all, right? We think this kind of coherence between our moral values and Christianity and its values necessarily enforces an idea and rhetoric that these values are something that we should accept as well. So when the church enforces an idea that we should tolerate individuals regardless of their religion and their identity, we think it's really good because necessarily people see it as a rhetoric and narrative that is logical, acceptable, and relatable. And this also enforces a rhetoric that is existing but diluted. Like Muslims who have been continuously fighting to say that we are good, don't discriminate us, right? This kind of rhetoric, now it has their credibility improved because we have a source that is necessarily not involved. Now this source necessarily makes your rhetoric one that seems credible. So at the end of the day, we would rather have the Pope get involved and help Muslims because we think the fight against Islamophobia has been failing. We need to do something about it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We do the open up, and then we go on to the
this speaker side opening opposition is willing to go against the anti-Islamic. The only problem we have with today is that we don't think the Pope is the right person and the time is not the right time. And it's against presidential debate, which is a big problem today, right? Because if you want to go against anti-Islamic as a whole, why would you go into presidential candidates who are running for president or become president? Why not go against the anti-Islamic as a whole instead of limiting it to just presidential candidates themselves, right? So today we're talking about three different things. One, the idea of how you're going to remove the control capital of the Pope in the long run. Number two, what you further propagate the anti-Islamic rhetoric. Number three, or what you think the anti-Islamic rhetoric will never run to the people of the running, to the running people in the first place, right? Before that, a couple of debunkers, those what they're talking about. First, what they're talking about how most Americans on the ground are discriminating towards the Muslims on the ground by having forced to look. We don't think that's happening in status quo right now. We think that even in the life of the president, we think that most people are supporting Muslims as a whole. Most people are saying that ISIS does not represent the Muslim ideology. Most people are going to social media to defend Islamic ideology, and by saying that ISIS does not represent the proper Muslim ideology, by taking the Muslim out of the right of there. Secondly, on the idea of why we're talking about how only Muslims, on the idea of how they're going to be able to create controversy and even gather criticism that be diluted after the presidential. I think that the only kind of controversy you're going to generate, and the only kind of discourse you're going to create is destructive discourse. Why? Because in the Paris Convention, people are so against Islam as a whole now, and now you have someone like Pope who's going to go out and support Islam, which is the kind of controversy you're going to be, this kind of controversy that creates destructive discourse. Because you think the people on the ground who are hardcore supporters of the anti-Islamic rhetoric will not hate the Pope, because they think the Pope is going against what they truly believe in, which is in the eyes of people, that Islam is their religion. And even if they were to create some good controversy, some good discourse, I think that the majority of the discourse will be diluted by the fact that these presidential candidates will say that the Pope is going against the ideology of what the most American people want. But confirm, fine. Okay, please state what Christian principle says that Muslims are dicks and we should not tolerate them.
Yeah.
Look, no Christian principle says that. We agree. So what we've been trying to say is that we do concede the fact that anti-Islamic rhetoric is growing in the US, but we don't think it's the right time and place to do that, especially at the times where this anti-Islamic rhetoric can gain so much popularity, whereby if you're going to use someone like the Pope, it's only going to create a lot of problems, right? You appreciate the right thing you talk, right? Thirdly, we're talking about how you're going to be able to make Christianity way more tolerable because it's more tolerable, right? We think that most people are going to be Christian. And people who are atheists never go towards Christianity now. When you realize when you self-rationalize, why would they go towards religion? It's creating so much controversy, and especially the rise of the Paris Convention. There's been there's possibly investment. But then talking about how it's better to value an ideology rather than pushing your ideology. We think it's a great idea to value an ideology. But let's look at how that worked out for Nazi Germany. When the British tried to push towards diluting their ideology, instead of pushing their own ideology, it didn't work out so well. Created Nazi Germany. That's exactly how it feel, right? But then you talk about how the presidential candidates has such great influence against the people and how they can easily change the mindset of people. For example, Donald Trump and his idea on how Americans are things about it, right? We can see that these candidates may have a lot of support and political channels towards the people, but we think that there will always be other candidates to counter that. For example, people like Bernie Sanders, people like Hillary Clinton, who will openly go out and criticize Trump for being a bigot, for going against the American values, to which we should always support people in the first place. We think that is good enough of a trade-off to be able to stop before we move on.
If you assume that when the Pope denounces these presidential candidates and the Pope is going against Islam, then if Vladimir Putin suddenly changes his mind to fight for homosexuals, does this mean that he's gay?
No, if Vladimir Putin were to go and support homosexuality, it is because there's enough pressure from the people that change his mindset and not that he becomes a homosexual in the first place. But even if we take that into we do agree that we don't see much leaders in this debate in the first place, right? So moving on to how we remove the political capital of the Pope look, I think that the Pope really has a substantial amount of modesty in the school, right? We think that all categories can go to point bigger, people who are bigger, people who are sensitive, people who are liberal and want to be ideological, but like the Pope has ideologies. We think that now, when you allow the Pope to go and support Islam by declaring by denouncing presidential candidates who use anti-Islamic rhetoric, we think it's not great to see number one. Because you're not taking the Pope for going against Christianity and the ideology and what the majority of people want to remove all these kind of Islamic people from the United States and from Europe as a whole. But there's a two thing that now you persuade the legislators to question the authority of the Pope on why he has the authority to influence the people on something like democracy. Because the Pope is someone who is a religious figure, because someone who intervenes with state sway the vote of senators towards people who are more open who are more open than against the anti-Islamic rhetoric. And that is the introduction to democracy, which I'm not sure explain. But number two, we think that candidates couldn't go against the Pope. And when these candidates will go against the Pope, and there's such a large supporter base from people who are anti-Islamic, I think this creates an even bigger problem. So now it further polarizes the Christian community, dividing them into half from people who do support the Pope, who still do support the Pope, and people who don't support the Pope. Now, right, let's look at the problem problems. In the long run, I think that even the Pope finds the right time, the right way to be able to denounce the anti-rhetoric, the rhetoric of anti-Islamic. We don't think the Pope has enough political capital to do that anymore, because it's not lost a majority of his back of supporter base to this policy. Secondly, the idea of how you further propagate anti-Islamic rhetoric. How do you further propagate it? We think that half of supporters will obviously hate the Pope because they are way against what they want. But number two, this sense does not blame this corrupting the Pope, because the Pope is supposed to represent the core principles of Christianity as a whole, right? And if the Christian people don't like the Islamic people, if the Pope goes against what the majority of people agree with, that's when the Pope loses its value. Now, when you have independentists who are the majority of people go against the Pope, that's when you further propagate the anti-Islamic rhetoric. Because now people, you're not be more eager to side with people who are anti-Islamic, because this instead of going towards people who are pro-Islamic, right? Early on here, why anti-Islamic rhetoric was never fine. We think that even if they take their best case scenario, where there is a system of anti-Islamic rhetoric that's growing in the US, even there will always be candidates like Bernie Sanders who have gained such a huge advantage with all the trending, all the assets that are trending on social media. These candidates can openly denounce why the anti-Islamic rhetoric is so bad, because these people are in a position here, because you have another political representation, they have enough authority and enough and the position to be able to influence the people who are having to bring it and never really see them from a different religion altogether, because they denounce the anti-Islamic rhetoric. But let's look at what they did respond from Ireland. They did respond to how you destroy democracy. They really brush it off. Number two, they did respond to how you limit the anti-Islamic candidates' ability to be able to gain and therefore become the president. And then the crowd will vote.
Thank you very much. That concludes the opening comment. Moving on, member of government.
Forgive me, Father, for I have sinned. I have murdered, I have raped, and for all of these things I deserve security and forgiveness, but never if I'm a Muslim, right? We think we change this type of rhetoric. We think we provide the best trickle-down effect and the best type of minimization of the harm. Because we understand that discrimination will still happen as a result of attacks like the Paris attacks and things like that, right? But we think what's worse is when politicians and presidential candidates can use political posturing to use fear to promote themselves, to form themselves into these campaigns. So the burden that I want to put in my speech, right, is that the Pope has a moral obligation and an individual interest in his own people and his own doctrine to defend his faith, and secondly, while we're able to reduce the type of rhetoric that these types of candidates will be able to forward in the future as well. So while my opening wanted to talk about discrimination as an effect of those rhetorics, I'll give a closing insight that analyzes the incentive of both the candidates and the Pope himself. The rest of my response will be integrated, right? But some that don't have to. Firstly, on this idea that we sway these voters disproportionately and democracy is shattered. We think firstly, that's not a bad thing, right? People are swayed disproportionately to vote for the security of Muslims. We think if they're safe, that's not a bad thing to begin with. But secondly, we think people vote on a myriad of issues and not just issues that affect the Muslim community, right? So things like feminism, healthcare, Israel, these are all things that are important to individual voters in and of themselves. So that's a trade-off that an individual voter can make at any point in time, and you cannot homogenize all of them everything is a subsequent effect that democracy still exists. Second response, right? Because does the Pope really lose political capital? We don't think so. We think the majority of people around the world are still massively influenced by what the Pope says and what the Pope does. And even if you're not a part of that Christian faith, right? This is something that applies to both Christians and those of other faiths. This is a person who is a representative of that faith in and of itself. He is the faith in Catholicism, and what he says is influential. But even if that's something that is negative, we don't think that can ever be a discourse that is destructive. And and not say that. We think the most destructive response is a response that never happens. When you assume something can never change, right? So we think on our side, we provide that even if that form of discourse is one that is negative, it can never be bad. Next time, on this idea that you segregate Christians, and that's really bad. We think firstly, Christians are already really segregated, right? That's why you have Catholics, you have Baptists, you have Methodists, right? And we don't think that's a problem. But more important within my extension. Okay. Firstly, let's look at presidential candidates. Let's have a real discussion of who these candidates actually are. When we tell you these are people who benefit from political posturing, using Muslims as a moral battering ram to forward their own individual causes. So there are people like Donald Trump who said we should put every Muslim on a registry because this makes you safer. Republicans say we should close our borders because that makes us safer as well. Even moderate news outlets like CNN invite Muslims to come on to talk about the terrorist attacks, but then demand for them to apologize for their actions to these terrorists that had nothing to do with them in and of itself. We tell you this is a rhetoric that is extremely powerful, sit down, and because it is extremely powerful, the problem is when it drowns out any possible counter narrative. So this is the side that says that Bernie Sanders and Hillary Clinton can counter that narrative, but we don't think so. Because firstly, Bernie Sanders and Hillary Clinton don't appeal to like conservatives and Republicans. But even within the Republican and Conservative Party in and of itself, we have people like Carly Fiorina, who, as difficult as it may be to believe, has said that she believes a Muslim can be president. But she is slammed and she's battered by people like Donald Trump and Ben Carson, who said that she's not a representative. So even that narrative drowns it out significantly, right? We think these are people that can tap into fear and makes it extremely powerful because of who they are. But let's contrast that to the Pope. Because we think, firstly, the Pope preaches Catholicism as a religion of peace. So his sermons never serve a self-interest. His interest is God's interest, right? So he like follows the Bible and he does what he thinks is consistent to the doctrine. But secondly, the Pope isn't someone who has a political goal of ensuring whoever gets into the White House, right? We think of course it would be great if we had someone who supported Muslims in the White House, but more importantly is the process. The political process is one that is extremely long. By this time next year, only then will we be voting in the general election, right? So in the long process of you campaigning and you using that Muslim rhetoric, it's something that transfers across borders, and we think that it's extremely bad because anti-Islamic rhetoric has no borders. It doesn't end where the border of the United States ends, right? It transfers across the world. But thirdly, we think the Pope denouncing this is just as influential, if not more influential, right? Because the people that Donald Trump and Ben Carson campaign to are people who faith is central to their own needs, people who just knows it, people who live in a place called the Bible Belt, right? So we think the leadership of the Pope as a figurehead of the faith provides that allows a dilution of the type of the church. We think other denominations, but also we incline to follow this as well, although they're not directly influenced. It's something that's also extremely good. Yes, everyone.
True or false? Majority of Americans are Protestants that ran away from the Catholic Church to escape being prosecuted, and a minority is Catholic.
Okay. No, that's false, isn't it? Anyway, regardless, right? We think the Pope is a face of the Christian faith. We think regardless of whether or not we have a clear and denominational line, if he says something good and you are a good person, you are entitled to follow it. We don't think that's a problem. What is the effect of this on political candidates is right now in the long term? We think we disincentivize them from running similar rhetoric, right? Because they understand that the people that try to appeal to are people who will lash out against them, So we concede that we might not be able to change Donald Trump, but that's not the important part, right? The important part is that we minimize the harm towards people who suffer at the hands of people who directly benefit from forwarding this kind of rhetoric. But my last extension, right? Because my last and very big extension on this idea of how we moderate Muslims towards Westerners of the Christian faith. Because we think either way, right? There's a homogenization of faith from people on either side. So Westerners see Muslims peaceful or violent as the same thing. But similarly, right? Muslims in radical places or places where they see their only influence see all of the Christian West as oppressors. That's why they're willing to bomb innocent people in Paris. Because they're all the same to them. So what does this do? You change that, right? You have a figurehead who comes up and who speaks out and says, no, there is a difference. We are willing to protect you. This is where, while you might not change the radical Islamists of ISIS, right? You change sympathizers to ISIS. We think, for example, the fact that in Malaysia, 1 out of 10 people is an
And for all of these reasons, Mr. Speaker, Methodist College, please give me a win.
Thank you very much. Continuing with the member of
There is a difference between an implicit statement that is made by the Pope and an explicit statement made by the Pope. The Pope may implicitly apply to all Catholics around the world that you cannot be a homophobe. You must accept homosexuals within your community. But he does not explicitly attack Russia for its homosexual laws because that is political suicide, even worse for the LGBT community over there, and homophobes will attack that even more. Now, let me get the first thing in this debate to talk about Catholicism, because I think that Catholicism is a major minority there. It's not in the Pope's interest to do this. Because here's the comparative. Discriminatory rhetoric will happen anyway. And mind you, that all Republicans candidates right now there are Catholics, right? They don't even care if the Pope attacks them anyway. The question is that how do we best tackle this kind of problem and prevent the problem of Islamophobia from being worse? We have two extensions for you in this speech. Firstly, what is the duty of the Pope and the effects of Catholics in the United States of America? And secondly, how their policy perpetuates dirty politics in the United States of America. Most of the rebuttals were rhetoric against Islam and Christianity or Catholicism to be interpreted, but a few things that stand out. Well, thank you. Firstly, regarding Gina's argument that the Pope has a moral obligation, because all his sermons are all about peace. We say that at their very best, even if that doctrine says that it's true, it is absolute political disaster. The Pope in this point in time must remain apolitical. They had the burden to prove to you why it's okay for the Pope to circumvent political strategies like that and why that was necessary. We already gave an example in my opening line, right? The Pope does not directly attack Russia for its homophobic laws, even though he hates homophobes. Because the harm will be even worse when Russians disconnect themselves from homosexuals, when Russians discriminate and alienate themselves from the Catholic Church. It's even worse because of the Catholic Church and openly tell Catholics that you cannot be a homophobe. That's the worst harm on the other side. And the Pope is the face of the Christian faith. No, right? Mormons and Republicans hate the Pope, right? We have seen a lot of discourse within the United States of America where Republicans who are more associated with the Episcopal or some other evangelical churches, that they criticize the Pope because they see the Pope as being more progressive. They claim that the Pope is straying away from the true doctrine of Christianity. Your side harms that even worse. But lastly, moderating Muslims. This may be true for Muslims around the world, but the Bible Belt states will still slam Muslims even more. This will come up more in my exception, why they will link Catholicism and Muslims under the same umbrella, but this will harm Muslims even more. You'll see more hate crimes being propagated against them. And the chain reaction is Muslims from the other parts of the world will hate America even more, because now they're committing those kind of crimes. On the front part in my speech. No, firstly, the duty of the Pope and the effects of Catholics in the USA. Catholics in the USA are currently a minority. They are not publicly attacked right now because the Pope remains apolitical when it comes to issues like that. So they are taken that into consideration. There are two duties of the Pope. Firstly, it is in his interest to try his best to protect Catholics around the world, and this includes Catholics in the United States, by the way. But secondly, he also has a duty to remain apolitical, because he does not want to harm this international relationship or harm the Catholics that are living as a minority in those kind of countries. What happens when the Pope takes a peripheral stance like that? And this directly clashes their narrative to change conservative. This further harms the Catholic Church, which is far beyond the Pope's incentive, and even if the Pope does, it's absolute suicide. Because now Catholics are seen as taking an active stance against the United States of America to antagonize them even more. But also, they told you that the influence of the Catholic Church is like very influential. This is not true. But assuming that that is true, this harms the concept of freedom and liberty. So let's understand the concept of this. The church is now seen as breaking the barriers between the separation of church and state, which is an integral part in every single democracy. And attack that a church, and now they are attacking a church that has been moderating. Now the narrative will be they see the church as demoderating and breaching the concept of democracy. This means that you see this kind of rhetoric again or from Republicans that they will attack Catholics even more because they see Catholics as hypocritical. Because if they are moderate, why on earth do they breach the concept of democracy? You lose the discourse that they are moderating because now they are seen as absolute hypocritical. Then they told you the significance of the Pope. We say it's not really a big thing in US once again, like they have to understand the demographic once again, because they are absolute minority. But more so, we say that it perpetuates hatred against Catholics even more. Hate crimes that it's unfortunate that hate crimes right now happen to Islam, Muslims around the world. But this will also happen to the Catholics as well. Even if there's no hate crimes, they will still speculate and discriminate them. What's even worse is when American politicians like Donald Trump question Catholics' identity. When they question the Catholics, are you for the United States or America, or are you for the Pope? Before the next remark, sure.
Okay, in the past, feminist narratives were like not agreed by patriarchal figures, but this created a lot of controversy, creating discourse and getting rights for women. Why shouldn't this also happen even if Protestants do not agree with the church?
That's the difference. Because feminism is a right that is enshrined, the rights that we fight for are enshrined in many countries. However, religion is something that's very fragile, that politicians would attack even worse. But then they tell you that the Pope should attack. We don't think the Pope should attack. Because now the Pope is seen as a terrorist. It's even harder to moderate now, because every time we say something implicitly about enfranchising Muslims around the world, folks use think he's pro-ISIS. This harms his ability to moderate, because now they see him as a terrorist and a hypocrite. They speculate against the Pope even more. More worse, Catholics will delegate away from the Pope. It's even harder to point out the Islamophones within Catholicism itself, because the Pope can't control his people within his state now, can't change. But lastly, perpetuation of dirty politics in the USA. They tell you that they will make people fear Islam in the world. We say it's even worse under their model, because you merge Islam and Catholicism. Fox News will literally now say that Catholicism is on the side of ISIS. Bible Belt states already hate Catholics because they are moderating. Now they hate them even more because they are seen as a merger with ISIS. This also harms Islam as a whole, because now Islam is seen as a bigger alliance, because like Islam is now somehow controlled by Fox News. This means they will act more aggressively attack Islam in the first place, because they see that Islam has now such an independent political figure. This means that they will form more legislation to harm Islamic people. This also disenfranchise Catholic politicians, because that's recognized. There are Catholic politicians that are moderating right now. Look at Joe Biden. And for your info, there was one Republican Catholic, John Boehner. He was considered a bit moderate, but the Republican Party shut him away because he's considered as more moderate in the other Christian factions over there. This is even worse when you delineate people away and discriminate them from the people that can actually internally change Republican Party's concept. This is more harmful than the other. I'm very proud of those.
Thank you very much. And the case of government side, government
Even though Kenneth Concept tells you that Catholics are minority within the USA, you tell that Catholics are still the majority faction or part of the majority religion in the whole wide world. The burden from our side was simple, and this was Gina's speech, which she start that it was all we had to do to show that there was some form of traction, there was some form of change or influence, that as long as we can propagate that, we once made in reducing the Islamophobia, that reduce the form of hate notions that come up from US presidents here.
what was Gina's extension and why is it so important that they actually tackle it properly? She's talking about political posturing and how these people are incentivized by certain things. Candidates bring rhetorics that attack people who sound really violent nowadays, right? So that's how they get attraction. We think that the only response coming from them was talking about Russia and how the Pope doesn't intervene. Which are really happy to do so as well. We think the Pope has this influence and has this obligation to do so for a few reasons, which will be in my issues. We'll take first issue, does it harm Christianity and what is the level or extent of influence from the Pope? Pope will talk to you about how everyone would lose their minds and people will quit their religion at this point in time. We tell them no. The Pope speaks quite slowly so we can all understand it. Instead of other real speeches. Number two, we think that this ideology is universal. Sure, something that they talk about. But what else did Gina tell you? She also told you that in any way, people will be more likely to follow the Pope now. Because now, the Pope is one that protects people. The Pope is one that shows this hope of light. And look, these people, or these liars in that sense, people who debunk each other and abuse each other, are individuals who are just people who want to express themselves for their political powers. But now the Pope, when he doesn't have any influence at all, we think that it's the best traction that you can give to people because now he is the best arbiter. I'll tell you why as well. Next, they're talking about how this doesn't influence candidates anyway. That's backing up from closing, right? They told that only Catholics be threatened in the USA and how churches lose out and this idea of Russia. Number one, sure, we're more than willing to intervene because the Pope has all its power. Number two, because there's a difference between the church protecting individuals and the church actually antagonizing and attacking people. So that's why the Pope doesn't come in and tell you everyone stop abortion right now because he's more moderate now and he's more susceptible to change. But he's not going out there and kill all the people who hate for homophobes. We think that these other rhetorics are so important for the Pope to actually now talk about. Next, let's talk to you about the idea of how the Pope is seen as a terrorist. We know that it's ridiculous and it's an over-exaggeration, right? Everyone knows that the Pope is generally and moral arbiter, and he's come out with so many neutral comments. He's open to technology. He's open to things like with abortion and ideas like that. He's the most open individual, the open Pope has ever had. He's so down to earth, right? So what can go wrong with people calling him an extremist? But even so, the example of Fox News, everyone knows Fox News is extremist, right? They come up with so many ideas. Ben Carson also believed like a terrorist against other terrorists, right? So we don't think that's true. No, thank you. What was the other issue here? What did we talk about? So I'm talking about the mass following that the Pope has and how, as long as he's not saying anything controversial, we think that's fine. Is this really controversial? This is a big question we have to ask ourselves. They told you yes, because as long as you oppose the concepts that politicians want to talk about, you are really controversial already. But we tell you no. As long as it's a neutral stance, as long as it's something that supports humanity, we think it's fine. What's the difference that makes us more unique within this debate? We tell you that when we come out as a side that's more neutral, that protects humanity, but not a religion, that is when we can gain the most traction, as you want to say. The only way to be extremist if the Pope comes out and say, kill all the politicians. That's not happening here in this debate, right? Yeah, idea will debunk if you talk in your speech. But sure, let's answer the next question. What is democracy as a whole? Opening told you that democracy was when people get to say whatever they want and how we limit them now in this case. That's democracy, right? Like you are supposed to try to make people sound less smart, and that's when you have a proper democracy. No, thank you. This is false because when you allow criticism, this is the best democracy you can ever have. But what did we also tell you in response? We told that democracy works best when people can see clear cuts in people's policies, when people are empowered to make better and informed decisions. We on this side, opening down. Next thing, so the idea of president debate and how it's enough, right? We tell you, we're talking about how Ben Carson will criticize Donald Trump, and this is enough check and balance. There you go. Because when you're on the same playing field, the same peers, that is when you debunk everyone else. But when you have an individual of influence, and some power that is that doesn't actually interfere or doesn't have any direct influence within the politicians themselves, this is when you can insert ideas on the third party views. Individuals on the ground are third parties anyway, so they will be more susceptible to actually understand these views as a whole. So the section
and a statement for Donald Trump that the Catholic Church and the Vatican is breaching the separation of state and religion. Bring that discourse to even more how far we're using to exploit the Bible without state.
It's not exploiting Bible without state, as long as it makes sense, right? But we tell you also this criticism is fine, because everyone criticizes anyway. People on blog spots criticize anyway. Why can't they be involved as well? But the point is, the only reason why this is more credible now is because it comes from an individual of influence here. More on this, number one, we tell you that these candidates are just as bad as each other when they influence, so when they talk about each other, they talk bad about each other. Like, no one likes Ben Carson anyway, so even if he says anything, like, it doesn't matter, right? Because, he's just a psycho, right? But anyway, when it comes to the Pope, we think it's much more influential, and he can actually post directly. These guys are bad, not because of them as an individual, but the policies they want to do. We think that this protects humanity better, and the notion of Islamophobia is that more used here. But what else did Gina cover that wasn't tackled? The idea of moderate Muslims and how Westerners and the Middle Easterns can now view each other as both moderates in a way. Because Christians are under the blanket now that seem as if they are all against Muslims this way. This is something you never tackled here except for Fox News, which didn't really make sense. But here's the thing, when we're talking about this, when Gina talking about this idea, she also told you about the idea of more acceptance, and he never told you how this acceptance was number one. Number two, how we never prove any change within people on the ground. We think that the third party coming in is the best way to prove its influence. We tell you that we are going to violence today.
Thank you very much. MCKK is one of the police opposition.
Ladies and gentlemen, never would I thought partnering Brian, a staunch professor, would actually benefit me. It will today, and you will see. Few rebuttals have stood up. Number one, this debate is about which side propagates moderation better, but we also have to take into consult which is better for the Pope and Catholicism. The idea that Kenneth brought up, that, and here's in history lesson guys, the Protestants of America are the people that ran away from Catholic Church long time ago because of Martin Luther. When he came up and protested, that's why they call Protestants. In case you didn't know. Because they found and they disagreed with the Catholic Church's idea of indulgence, the idea of even if you buy these things, were deeply against what Protestants felt, and that's why it started their own state. So the majority of Americans, and here's the hierarchy: Protestants, Anglicans, Methodists, Jewy but not too Jewy, Satan worshippers, Catholics. Unfortunately, considering that you are the minority of America, and a lot of the majority do consider you already different, it is a problem when they can merge you together. And I also want to tell you why. When the Pope considered is a nice guy compared to Pope Benedict, which is a pain in the ass, I'm intended, is a problem when he can be used the same brush as an Islamic sympathizer. Someone that's in line with terrorists and someone that's in line with the connotations of Muslim views that aim and seek to hurt Americans everywhere. That is a problem for Catholics and that is a problem for people. Few rebuttals to that. Number one, we tell you that change is harder on government side. Why? Because when we already characterized to you that Catholicism and Catholics are a minority within America, which most Protestants don't like because of the beliefs that they believe in. Brian doesn't like Catholics because he doesn't agree with the way that they have propagated religion in comparatively his scriptures. This is what they would say. They would say that number one, the Pope is actually not a proper Catholic. That the Pope or Catholicism is not a proper religion. That the majority should be siding with. There are great examples of when this happened. When Mormons dislocated themselves from Catholicism, when the Pope said, let's have contraception, or let's allow gay marriages, let's allow human beings to be treated as human beings. We see dislocation because a lot of people on the ground, Americans, don't know the Pope. The Pope can't speak English. They can deeply sympathize with the priests who also have the ideology that they believe that are in scripture in comparison to wanting to trust a foreign Pope that they probably only met this year. That's true. But secondly, this is the argument here. What can Fox News do? This is where debating in world starts. We all in Malaysia are moderates and we believe that Fox News are complete bullshit. But that is not certainly true within America. But they're the most watched television news network in America. So we can all concede that a majority of Americans do subscribe subscribe to what Fox News feels to them. Here, we agree that is stupid, and I'm glad for all of us to agree on that. But unfortunately, it's different there. And the things that Fox News can do to the minds of Americans are further perpetuated when the Catholic Church and Catholicism and the Pope is there. I know you can, I think you're later. One of the questions that we have answered in this debate, number one, we will question is the Pope is best person in this human time. Given that the Beirut and the Paris attacks are within our minds, that most Catholics and most Americans already don't have sympathy towards the Muslim minority of their community, we make it harder for the Pope to propagate moderation. And that's what is Kenneth's unique extension. Because once you make the Pope look like an antagonist, once you allow Fox News and Republicans and the other majority religious groups who will make the Pope as an antagonist that does not agree to what we believe in, you make it harder for him to be resonating within the society in America as well. And that harms the image of the Pope. So on the other side, they say that since he's the voice of moderation, he's the best person to do this. We don't think he is the voice of moderation. But given the status quo now, it is not okay to get people on his boats in America who get to are devout to him or really would disagree. And this tarnishes his image as a religious leader. If we can all completely want him to stay in power as long as he could, because he is the voice of moderation within Catholicism, you harm his image to moderate in the future. This is the most important one. That is
okay. You're right here, Pope and ISIS sympathize. That happens because Americans homogenize all Muslims. So if Muslims moderate as a result of this denunciation, don't we dilute that discrimination better?
But that is considered that you can convince the majority that sympathizing with Muslims does not equal to supporting terrorists. What Kenneth told you is it's not that easy given the status quo. It is much more difficult, and we think it's easier in the future when people don't remember this attack, when they're not trending on Facebook and hashtag pay for Paris and they're changing the profile because they've forgotten about it. It's easier over time. Second question, which is better for Catholicism? They brought to you that the church should and can influence others. We think that it can and should, but it should not try to influence politics. The separation between church and state, which was also an extreme extension, was created just as much to protect the state as it was to protect the church. Once the Pope takes an active step in condemning GOP runners, it now allows them to start condemning him back, and that is harmful when he tries to be the voice of moderation. They would say that and majority of Americans will agree, that they will point out and say, this guy is attacking Americans, this guy is attacking our values, you should not subscribe to his values, because he is not one of us. He does not know what we went through. And it's very easy for a lot of moderate people to even agree and resonate with that, and you will find that harmful. So we think that what's best for Catholicism in the church's viewpoint is to remain implicitly saying things like what Kenneth wanted, instead of coming out and attacking other individuals, which opens him up for attack. Whereas Kenneth did extension. Then lastly, what did Kenneth also talk to you about? He talked to you about how this affects the politics and the standing of minority Catholics within America. Now, you make it easier for you to trump up every single moderate Muslim sympathizer who's a Catholic together with Islam. You make it easier for people to want to disenfranchise them and marginalize them further because they are seen as the bad people. And now the Catholics on the ground, when they feel disenfranchisement, they will want to dislocate themselves from that idea. So that is how you handle moderation. I'll join you in the final. See you later.